Welcome back, everyone. Following multiple reports claiming that JJ Reddick was about to become the Lakers' new head coach, we got an interesting turn of events earlier today, with a new report claiming that he is not in fact their top pick, and rather, that would have to be current University of Connecticut head coach Dan Hurley. I mean, we're kind of getting a battle between Shams and Woj right now, with Shams, and really the entirety of the Athletic having been very confident about JJ Reddick, but now Woj kind of throwing that for a loop, with him reporting that Dan Hurley is the Lakers' #1 pick, and I'll let you hear about what he had to say.
Been the Lakers' target from the very beginning of this search. They have talked to other candidates, they have done their due diligence, because they aren't sure they can get Dan Hurley, but he has been their target, he continues to be their target, and now talks have some traction. Dan Hurley, they've had some preliminary contact with Hurley, they have talked, and they are going to talk more, and they're going to do so imminently. Hurley, the Lakers are going to talk about what it would look like to take Dan Hurley's program and put it with the Lakers, put it with their storied brand in the NBA. The NBA has always been an ambition of Dan Hurley. He's not been shy about talking about that. He is literally at this point the most sought-after coach in all of basketball. And Rob Pelinka, Jeannie Buss are determined to bring him to LA. They are preparing, I am told, a long-term, massive contract to get him to come. And I think for the Lakers and Pelinka, they want to put in place a program. They don't want to be changing coaches every couple years.
Again, Dan Hurley is without a shadow of a doubt their top pick according to Woj. Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss are quote-unquote determined to secure Hurley as their head coach. And I don't know about you guys, but that to me sounds like they would prefer him over JJ Reddick. However, there's no guarantee that Dan Hurley will even take their offer. Now, he thankfully does appear to be open to hearing them out at the very least, but that does not mean they want to take over for them at head coach. Who knows, maybe it does, but it's not like he is in a bad situation where he is at right now. I mean, the guy is coming off back-to-back NCAA championships, and not to mention winning them in the most dominant way possible maybe ever, including 12 straight double-digit wins, along with simply making their opponent look foolish at times. And with that in mind, would Dan Hurley really be willing to leave that for the NBA? And not only that, but to take on a job that will come with a lot of scrutiny and pressure, which might not be the situation that he would want to walk into. But we'll talk about the likelihood of it happening, what he would bring to their team, and then if he would be a better option compared to JJ Reddick. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. And for a brief overview on the background of Dan Hurley, he has now been a head coach for about 15 years now, all of which have come at the college level. He began by coaching Wagner University back in 2010, but then was offered a job at Rhode Island after a 25-6 season. And then after a great half-decade at Rhode Island, including 2 appearances in the NCAA tournament, he was then offered a job at the University of Connecticut. And as many of you know, he has been able to turn them into an absolute powerhouse. They have now made the NCAA tournament in 4 straight years, along with them winning it for the past 2. And throughout that time frame, they have had a record of 106-29, the best record at the D1 level throughout that time frame. And if you're wondering how he did it, it's not been by one thing alone obviously, but a big part of it has been the adaptation of the modern NBA style of play. Like I've talked about before on my channel, you cannot really compare the NBA and college game at this point. I mean, I would say about 90% of college teams have a playbook that would resemble an NBA team about 15 years ago, or in other words, they have not changed very much. Unlike the NBA, you do not have to worry about defensive 3 seconds in college, and then combine that with a longer shot clock, and you have a significantly slower game, which is a primary reason for why it can take a young player so long to adapt to the NBA. With that being said though, there are a few college coaches that have adapted to it pretty well, and one that's been doing it better than any of them is Dan Hurley, who has really taken advantage of the pace and space that many NBA teams try to incorporate. And well, like I mentioned before, that has led to his teams doing very well, and to absolutely no surprise at all, NBA teams have taken notice, with the Lakers being at the forefront. Again, you would typically be worried about a college coach being able to make that transition, but not Dan Hurley. If anything, he might be doing it better than a large majority of NBA coaches right now, though we cannot say that for sure quite yet. Even with him, it still would be taking a bit of a risk. He has been taking advantage of college teams that have not been able to adapt to the modern style of play after all, but how might that look against an entire league of teams that play the same way? Now, I for one am not too worried about it, but I do think that's worth mentioning. You can never be too sure about a college coach. even one at the level of Dan Hurley, though I do think he would be a pretty damn good bet in regard to handling the NBA style of play. But how about coaching 30-plus-year-old men? Up until this point, he has only been coaching 18 to 23-year-old young adults, which is a big difference compared to coaching a 39-year-old entering year 22 like LeBron. And not only that, but the knowledge of the game will be way different as well. There are not many players at the college level that could challenge him in regard to knowledge for the game, though that would not remain true in the NBA. Even apart from LeBron, you got a lot of smart guys on every NBA team. And don't get it twisted, there will be moments when they try and challenge him. And if he cannot handle it, then they will more than likely lose respect for him, much like what happened with Darvin Ham. Though I don't think that would be an issue with Dan Hurley. From everything that I have seen, the guy appears to be a basketball savant. And funny enough, a really good example of that is when he appeared on JJ Reddick's podcast back in April, where he on the fly talked about their offense for well over 3 straight minutes. And here's a quick clip.
We want to have 10 different formations, all right? Whether it's, a floppy, a regular horns with the 4 and 5 high, an inverted horns, a low 1-4, a box set. We want to have 8 to 10 different, different formations that we would have, all these different wrinkles for, right? Something for a shooter, whether it's like a, wide pin or flare rescreen or, a jet, jets for us, which are staggers. So out of every formation, we want to have something for a shooter, something that's going to finish with some type of a ball screen action, something with a deep post up, something to open up an ISO for somebody to drive it. We want to have, so out of each formation, anytime we run it, the defense is going to have no idea whether it's a post up, something for a shooter, or whatever it is. So
again, pretty funny that came while talking to JJ Reddick, who has now become his competition for a head coaching job. And not only that, but LeBron himself even complimented Dan Hurley on that post, kind of endorsing him without even knowing it. And with that in mind, how do they compare to each other? Or what might make one a better option than the other? And well, it's really difficult to say that. For one, Reddick has never been a head coach before, and then Dan Hurley has never coached at the NBA level, really making them two completely different candidates when trying to compare them. The only one thing I can definitively say about them is that they are both students of the game, although being borderline obsessive about getting better, and that is definitely what you want from your head coach. Other than that though, I think the only other thing you could draw a comparison to would be their likely style of play. Again, we don't know for sure with JJ Reddick having never been a head coach, but I imagine they would both bring a rather innovative offensive scheme to their team. I would call both of them more offensive-minded compared to defensive-minded, but they are both pretty intense too, which would likely translate well to their team buying in on defense, though you can never say that for sure. And I think that is where the comparisons would end. After that point, I'm not sure you can find anything else to compare them with, though there are definitely things that would make them different, with the first of them being head coaching background. He might not have been a head coach at the NBA level, but Dan Hurley has been a head coach for about 15 years now, and coaching at the D1 level is no joke, especially when you have been dominating it like he has been. And well, I for one would feel a whole lot more confident about a guy like that compared to JJ Reddick, who, don't get me wrong, I think could become a great head coach, but there's definitely more risk with him compared to Dan Hurley. Again, there's never not a risk when it comes to hiring a head coach, but there's simply no way you could feel more confident about hiring JJ Reddick compared to Dan Hurley. Maybe from a long-term outlook you can make an argument, but Dan Hurley would actually know what to do from day one. He won't have to learn how to become the head coach while doing it, which is without a doubt taking a risk. And in my opinion, I would take the guy with a legitimate head coaching background, along with somebody that is a proven culture builder like Dan Hurley, and that is something the Lakers have been looking for, though it really all comes down to him wanting the job, which unfortunately might not come to be. But with all of that being said, what do you guys think? How do you feel about Dan Hurley as a head coach? And would you take him over JJ Reddick if you had the choice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. That will do it for this video though. Big thank you to those of you who took the time to watch until the end of this video, and until the end of all of my videos in general. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit that notification bell to never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.